Before we get started with Intact, I do want to cover a couple of things with you all. So Ashton, if you'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Just as a reminder of who your contacts are, I think everyone should be fully aware of who you need to reach out to if you have questions or concerns. So that screen is there for your reference. So if we'll go to the next slide, please. I do want to take a minute just to share with you a couple of slides that come directly from our State Superintendent Mo Green's office around his Achieving Educational Excellence. And so his goal is that by 2030, North Carolina will have the best public school system in the nation. And we want to make sure that you all are aware of components of the strategic plan. We mentioned this briefly when we met back in the fall for our monitoring training with Title I CRATE, but do want to share a couple of other slides with you just so that you have access to these. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So here are the 8 pillars, and those are there for your reference. Particularly if you take a look at those, we are wanting to prepare each student for their next phase in life. And I think 21st century is a key component of that. With the work that you guys are doing around the state to help our students every day with their academics, as well as their social and emotional needs. And so Pillar 2 is revere public school educators. Pillar 3, enhance parent, caregiver, and community support. Another key pillar that I do feel 21st century has a major piece of. Pillar 4, ensure healthy, safe, and secure learning environments. Again, that speaks directly to 21st century. Pillar 5, optimize operational excellence. Pillar 6, lead transformative change. Which can also be part of our goal as a 21st century organization. Pillar 7, celebrate the excellence in public education. We do our best to celebrate the work that you guys are doing around the state. The more information you can get out there to your communities about the work you're doing, the better we are. Pillar 8 is then galvanize champions to fully invest and support public education. So those are the 8 pillars that we just want to make sure that everyone on the call is aware of. And if you want to learn more about Mo's strategic plan, you can scan this QR code here, and it will take you directly to the strategic plan so that you can read more about specific outcomes and goals that we have there. Okay, and we can go to the next slide. Just have a couple of reminders before we turn it over to Intact. Remember, second and third installments, you can request those funds at any time once you have met the attendance metrics. So that slide is there for your reference as a reminder. Do not forget that the final submission for second and third installments is April the 17th. That is a hard deadline, so please make every effort to meet your goals by April the 17th. If you have any questions about where you are with meeting these goals, please reach out directly to your program administrator. And one final reminder, we are trying to work very closely with the allotments division at DPI and school business, and we are prepared to send allotment logs for these dates for the remainder of this year. So January 16th. We will send an allotment log this week. So if you have not already submitted for second or third installment, if you get those in today, chances are you will make that January 16th log. If you have submitted January 1st up until today, you will be included on this next round on January the 16th. So just be mindful of those dates. We are sending those logs twice a month. And we are not able to send any additional logs without approval from the allotment section. So just wanted to make sure that you are aware of these dates. These are shared in the listserv as well. Okay. And if there aren't any questions, I am going to turn over the presentation to our friends at Intact, and they can take it away.
All right, sounds good. Well, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, Happy New Year, everybody. Hope you guys are having a wonderful and productive New Year. It does bring to mind, since we're talking about summer learning just throughout this whole series, that January is the time where, like, I know when I was running program, it would occur to me, like, oh man, I really need to start this planning. Like, there are things that I wish I'd been planning that, I hadn't gotten on top of. But thankfully, because of this series, you guys are ahead of the game on that. So we're really excited to continue our work together today in part two of Making a Difference, connecting the what to the how. So today we're going to be moving into the middle of your logic model. So those are, your inputs, the things that, you can actually, put in and create activities from, and then what those outputs are, right? Like how frequently we are delivering that content and what that looks like. The things that really bring your summer program to life. So this session is going to build directly on what we did last month, where we took the needs, we examined our outcomes and our theory of action, the things that we developed previously in our logic model. So before we get started, let's do some quick introductions. I'm Chaz Sumners. I'm a TA liaison here with our National Technical Assistance Center. I have had the joy of teaching English and special education for 11 years. And, throughout that time and additional to that time, I worked my way up through programs, started as a frontline staff as a side college job. And turns out I really loved working with tiny humans. So, it's something that I really invested a lot of time in. And the more you do that stuff, the more responsibilities get put on you, the more titles you end up getting. And then, eventually you're worrying about a bunch of different programs instead of just yours. So I'm familiar with a lot of these, the hurdles and challenges that come with planning a large program. And with me today is the amazing Yana List.
Um, hey Chaz, hi everyone. It's great to be with you again. I've done many of these webinars. I was out in December on vacation, but it's great to be back with you. Everybody's having a great new year. And I'm excited to continue talking through the process of building that logic model and how you can really apply it and make sure that you are using the lessons from your logic model to create a meaningful program. So Chaz, I think you are going to be starting us off.
I am. So let's jump in. So this graphic shows the pathway to summer excellence, right? The one that we've been walking for quite some time. So in October, we talked about identifying your program team, right? The people that are going to make your summer real, the folks that are going to be really invested in your program and really doing the work from day to day throughout the different tiers of your program structure, right? So these people might include, an instructional lead who knows the standards, maybe like an enrichment wrangler for those community contacts, because there's always somebody in the community who really has their finger on the pulse and they know everybody, right? So they can get you in touch with that person that you really wish you had that contact with. An operations and logistics person, somebody who can talk to your buses and make sure that transportation is running on time, your cafeteria staff, making sure all the logistics stuff is in place. Somebody like a data compliance staffer, so somebody who keeps you ready to report your 21st CCLC program outcome measures, people like that. And then in November, we talked about what it means to really do quality needs assessment, right? And that's the thing that you're going to need to complete if you want to know how to make your summer program really make a difference with youth and families, right? There's You're not really making as much of an impact as you could be if you're not doing that needs assessment. You're figuring out what your community needs, because you could be delivering a great program, but it might not be addressing the specific needs of the community that you're serving. So that's why it's really important to start with that high quality needs assessment. And in that session, we dove into the types of data that you would then use for that needs assessment. So, community data, school data, student voice and choice data, all the things that are going to be informing what you're doing in your program, and also the activities that you're going to be, developing in this part of the logic model. And then in December, in part one of this session, we focused on what it means to really identify the needs. So once you've done the needs assessment, then you look at that excuse me, you look at that data and you identify what the really high value needs are for your program or for your community. And then what outcomes are realistic for you to be able to deliver. And then what that theory of action is going to be, right? So we figured out what our needs are. We figured out what we'd like to, the impact that we'd like to have, which is our outcome. And then we talked about what our larger theory of action is. So today, we're going to move one step further along that pathway to summer excellence into translating your why into the how as we really complete that logic model. So, our objectives for today. By the end of the day, you're going to be ready to dive into the core of your summer program design, those resources that you'll need, and the activities that you'll run, and the outputs that you'll track. So, before we move forward, let's take a moment to reconnect with the work that you did in part one. So before you created a needs statement that's grounded in the data that you collected during your needs analysis, right? Then you identified outcomes that are going to respond to those needs. So you figured out a specific need, and then you said, I would like our program to be able to meet that need by doing A, B, and C. And then you drafted a theory of action that explains how you're actually going to create that change. We have identified that there is a deficit in literacy education. It looks like we have low literacy scores. So what we'd like our program to do is improve literacy outcomes by a certain metric. And the way that we're going to do that is by implementing impactful, and highly intentional literacy education in our out of school time program. So all that work that you did last month really matters today. Everything that we build, every activity, every resource, every output should connect back to those needs and those outcomes. So we hope that you brought your logic model draft with you, or at least to have that data available to you or fresh in your mind. So go ahead and think about what that, either think about what that is or open it now if you have it. So we'd like to take a look at what you've already done. So share with us in the chat, what have you accomplished and what's keeping you from moving forward with your logic?
If we could make sure that you are muted so that everyone can hear, would be appreciated. Just make sure that your mic is on mute. Thank you.
So as you write in the chat, there are a lot of different things that could impose some sort of barrier to be able to implement this. Maybe not knowing the folks in your community. Maybe you're new to your community. You don't know the people that you need to tap to really build that program team. You don't know who that enrichment wrangler is, something like that. Maybe you're really having some trouble doing the needs statement. Or maybe that's something that you got solidly and you're trying to figure out how to turn it into a theory of action. So share with us in the chat, one, what you've already accomplished when it comes to the logic model, and two, what's keeping you from moving forward to doing more things. And again, if we could please make sure that we're all muted, just makes it easier so that, we're not talking over each other. Oh, okay, here we go. Let's see here. So Tanya says, we've begun collecting our student input on what they want to get out of their summer program. The barrier for us has been the weather. That's fair. Yeah, right. Because there's only so much you can do when, you're dealing with really serious inclement weather that's keeping people inside and you're not able to share that information. So hopefully you get clearer weather soon, and that makes it a lot easier to keep moving forward. But getting that student input is really important because that's how you make sure that you have really engaging programming that you can then, make sure that people really want to engage with. So Brittany says, we've addressed our needs for our summer program and we're starting to plan the inputs with the school system we partner with. That's really important too, right? Because once we have all of those needs identified, and we know what our data is, then figuring out what realistically we have available to us in order to affect that change is really important. Make sure all of our ducks in a row. And the fact that you're working with your school partners is awesome because that really opens up the resources that you have. Paula says, we have a plan for obtaining current data for our summer students. We just need to execute that plan. That's awesome. Having the plan is more than half the battle, quite frankly, because getting a plan together, figuring out how you're going to collect that data is really difficult, especially if you're not accustomed to doing it. Tara says, I'm starting to meet with the staff to discuss this and schedule additional planning sessions. Yeah, making sure that the team is involved in this process is really important, right? Because then it shows just how impactful all these things that we do are. It makes it seem like nobody who is on our program team is just doing busy work. It all has a direct impact to what we're doing with our youth. Setting up working parts of ours with the superintendent and the school level folks. Yes, again, the fact that you guys have this much interaction with your school level partners is amazing. I can't tell you how many programs I talk to that don't. So that's great. Most of the age group that participates with our program also do summer school. So a lot of our dates and times are contingent on those plans. We don't have a partnership with the schools over the summer yet. So again, like, you know, that's not necessarily something you always have, a partnership with the schools, but starting to like bring those have those discussions can be really important, and that can start with demonstrating the impact you've already had for your program, right? Hey, school level folks, this is what we can do, this is how we can help, let's all work together. Let's see, we've had a change in program staffing and need to orient and regroup with a new team. Yeah, I mean, you know, that happens. There's a lot of turnover when it comes to our program folks, and that's something just we know, right? And so even if you have a really good program team, building that new program team can be tough. We're in the process of analyzing student data and surveying families to gather input to guide our planning for the summer. We're also collaborating with other district departments to blend funding. Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. As long as we're making sure that we're very clear about what those funding streams are, right? And the staff application's gone out, and we're going to select staff by the end of January. Awesome. So you're already on the road to program team and getting your people together. That way you can make sure they're nice and trained up before you hit the ground running. We're in the process of surveying our parents to get their input, what their expectations are. Yes, because as much as important as it is to get our student voice, we also need our family voice, right? We want to know what our parents are expecting our programs to do for them. Met with principals this week to identify target areas of need to address academically using, testing data and to work out logistics of summer programming. Perfect, right. Yeah, using that data to then look at what our needs are to see that how we can actually do that. And then again, I see this like pretty much the same thing we're talking about with Ashley here. And we're close to contact with the district, we're in close contact with the district, and we're beginning planning meetings together in February. That's awesome. Like that's that collaborative piece. So instead of just, touching base with each other, that joint planning is a much deeper level of interaction with your school day partners, and it's really going to pay off. That's amazing. Working with 21st Century staff and school level staff to plan for summer programs. Yeah, absolutely. We've begun meeting the district to plan dates and times for summer. Yep, making sure that's all coordinated. And the staff met to begin collecting data and deciding what is needed for the summer program, right? Because we need to decide what data we want to collect, right? And we want to make sure that we're honoring the different levels of data so that we have it from different tiers. That's amazing. You guys are like ahead of the game. And it doesn't look like there are too many things that are in your way. So I'm glad that you have what looks like a fairly clear path forward. So let's talk about those inputs, right? Because it looks like a lot of us are looking at what our inputs are. So let's talk about what inputs are and how we're going to use them. So inputs are the resources and the assets that make your program possible, right? Period, end of sentence. It sounds like a big term. That's what it is. It's the things that you have that make programming possible. Think about them as like the ingredients in whatever you're cooking. And now I've made myself hungry. Great. That's what I get for not eating breakfast. When we talk about inputs, we're not just talking about money or materials. We're talking about the people that you have, the staff, the team that you have, the partnerships, the partnerships that you might have with your school day folks or certain community partners that can, really add value to your programming. We're also talking about the spaces that you have, right? Because there are a lot of different things that can be done with the spaces that we have as long as we're creative and flexible. Even if those spaces might be, disparate in whatever building we're using. They might not all be together, right? I've had programs where it's like, okay, well the main room's here, and then you have to walk what feels like half an hour to get to, where the kids are doing sort of recreational activities or like, more like physical activities. It also includes tools that allow you to make the activities happen. So, any sort of, data collection stuff you might have, any sort of, larger systems that you might have in place that you could, implement to enhance programming. So a strong logic model makes these inputs really explicit. So we're very specific about what these inputs are, and it helps you to see what you already have and what you still need to secure. So you say, okay, well, I want to put together this activity, and I have 4 of the 5 things that are necessary for it. So maybe I can go then tap my school day partner. Maybe I can go find a different community organization. Maybe there are other ways to meet this fifth need, or maybe we can modify the activity to not have that fifth need. We'll dive into that when we talk more about planning activities in a little bit. But here are some things that you want to think about, right? You want to think about budget. So your budget reflects your priorities. As you think about the activities that you want to plan, consider what your resources are. So, for example, do you need really high quality literacy materials? And are they things that you have, or are those things that you need to purchase because you need to budget for those? And as a former English teacher, I can tell you high quality literacy materials aren't very cheap. Um, do you need things like transportation to ensure access, right? Is there something that you need to set up logistically, making sure that our buses are running on time, depending on the timing of our program? Um, Also, do you need funds for family engagement events, right? Because those things can get costly pretty quickly, especially if you want to do something really fun that people are going to come, and actually enjoy. And I mean, quite frankly, families aren't going to come to an event unless it's really engaging. And that's also where your family your needs is in your needs analysis, and you're doing those surveys with your family. Those are things that you can ask in those too, right? What would you like to see when it comes to family engagement events, so that you're making sure that you're putting together high quality and engaging events that people want to attend. This is also a really good moment to think about sustainability, because again, as you're looking at what you might need, um, you might think, okay, well, let's think about how we can branch out and maybe look at our community partners to see how they can help support this, right? And that ensures that not only is it supported in the short term, but it's also supported as grant funding starts to decrease. So it's something that helps you in the long term as well as helping you in the short term. You also want to think about what you can build into your budget right now that's going to strengthen your program long term, right? Things that are investments in the long term health of your program. Those high quality literacy materials feel like that, right? It's something that we can use over and over and over, and we can use it in a bunch of different ways. Personnel is something else you really want to think about. Personnel is, quite frankly, in my opinion, most often your most important input, right? The people that are doing the work, right? The people that are staying late, the people that are dealing with the skinned knee, those are our folks who are our most important, input that we're actually using in our programs. So you want to think about who's best positioned to deliver the individual activities that you're planning, right? All of us have different strengths. And so all of us flourish in different environments, right? We're all stars. We just need to figure out how we're shining, right? Like what position in the sky we need to be to shine. So what qualifications do they need? If they might be lacking in qualification, maybe they're really good, but they need this additional qualification to be able to actually deliver the instructional content we're talking about. Do they need some sort of specialized training? Maybe you are really good and engaging and you're great at doing these high energy activities, but you need specific training for this activity. That kind of alignment makes a tremendous difference when it comes to engagement and belonging, right? And not just for your youth, excuse me, not just for your youth, but also for your staff, which is a benefit for the long term health of your staff. Because when your staff feels like they also belong and have a place there, then they are less likely to leave, right? And we can make sure we're maintaining this program team that we're building. When we talk about curriculum and training, you want to ensure that your activities are not just engaging, but I mean also effective, right? So they can be fun all day long, but are they actually doing the thing that we want? And so, how do we figure that out? We figure that out by asking ourselves things like, what evidence-based curriculum aligns with our outcomes? Um, what training will staff need before the program starts, like we were just talking about with personnel? Or maybe what ongoing coaching or support will help them implement the activities you're talking about with real fidelity. Um, this is also a really great place to think about alignment with your school day partners, because we can make sure that what we're doing with our school day partners mirrors what we're doing in our after school program. So our out of school time program, so that we make sure that we are supporting the academic instruction that's going on during the school day. Facility, right? Your facility shapes what's possible, right? I mean, we are very much prisoners of the confines of our own facilities and, like, the spaces that we work in. So think about the spaces that you might need for for the activities that you're planning. Are you going to need some quiet areas for literacy? Maybe some open spaces for movement, rooms for family engagement, maybe safe outdoor areas, things of that nature. Um, you also want to consider accessibility for students with disabilities, um, or for families and community partners, right? And then, speaking of our community partners, your community partners expand your capacity and deepen your impact. They help you do they help you reach more families than you would be able to reach on your own, right? Partners can provide enrichment, they can provide wraparound services, family engagement, or specialized expertise. Um, so as you think about your partners, you want to consider which partners align with your needs and outcomes, what value they add, and how they're going to be able to collaborate and communicate with you, right? Because having those clear, very easy lines of communication are the key to collaboration. The harder it is to communicate with each other, the less it's going to happen, and the less you're going to collaborate. Partnerships are strongest when they're intentional and mutually beneficial, right? So you have to show how the community partner is also benefiting from what you're doing. And we're going to talk about partnerships more in March, but I just really wanted to, take a moment and talk about it. So just a quick reality check before we we do our select inputs activity. In the chat, type the number for the category that's usually the biggest constraint in programming. So is it budget? Is it community partners, personnel, training? Here, I'm gonna copy this and I'm gonna post it in the chat. There we go. So give me a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Um, Oh, there we go. We're already getting numbers. All right, there we go. Yes. Yeah, the biggest constraint. Budgets, personnel, right? Having our people and our money looks like what's coming in stronger. All right, I see 1 5 there, getting our community partners involved. Again, we're going to talk a lot more about how you do that in March, but don't worry. Don't worry. We're going to help you support that. Man, I'm seeing, okay. So I'm seeing a lot of budget. I'm seeing a lot of personnel. Um, it's important to really think about these things, because if we don't name our constraints and our inputs, our activities aren't going to be realistic, right? We can plan really great activities, but if our budget is our huge constraint and we don't have the money for it, then it's pointless. We can't do anything with it. It helps you reinforce doing this helps you reinforce feasibility, just like the feasibility of your inputs, and it buys time. It helps you, like, figure out what you need without it feeling like you're really working too hard, in aspects of your program that aren't within your logic model. Okay, So let's now talk about inputs. Next, we're going to complete an input activity, right? And we're going to use this sample family data, the family literacy and college enrollment data that was the sample for our logic model. It's on screen for you here. So you don't need your own program's data for this part. The inputs are going to be the resources and assets that we need to implement the program. Um, and when we're talking about implementing the program, we're talking about the things that we need to implement it with quality, right? So things like staffing, training, materials, space, partnerships, funding. Um, our inputs aren't just a wish list, right? They're the practical conditions that make our activities possible. So before you start, looking at what your inputs are, here's the lens that we're going to use, right? Strong inputs are specific, actionable, and connected to delivery. So if we're saying that families are going to attend literacy supports and move towards enrollment goals, then the input should include what makes that realistic, who's doing the work, and what supports families need to really access it, right? Do we need to make sure that we're looking at times, for our family literacy events? Do we have a disproportionate number of our families who might be working during the evening? And so we need to look at having earlier slots. Maybe we offer multiple times for this family literacy event. We also want to think about what tools we'll need to run it consistently, right? So, do we need that high quality literacy material? Is it something we already have, or is it something that we're going to need to buy in order to implement this activity? So, I just want you to take a moment to look at these 5 input categories on the right here. So, budget, personnel, curriculum, training, facility, community partners. In a minute, you're going to select 2 inputs for each category that match this sample model, 2 or 3. Um, I do want you to keep these questions in mind. If we didn't have this, what would break first? Like if this input wasn't here, what would fail first? And what do families need to fully participate and do so equitably, right? Think about transportation barriers, things like that. Scheduling. Maybe there's some trust building that you have to do. Maybe the folks in program, the families don't really know your program. So you're going to have 5 minutes of quiet work time. Please write your selections down using this template that I'm about to put in. But when you enter it, don't press enter yet. I'll prompt you and we're all going to press enter at the same time. So here is our template.
I feel like we should have some elevator music to
Yeah, I'm
give
really
everyone
thinking about that now. Yeah, it would be
a
great to
little
have some
soundtrack.
little bossa nova playing. That'd be lovely. So take some time to do that right now, and we'll give you a minute because we've been talking at you a lot. So I'll give you a second to process all of this. And again, don't enter. Don't press enter once you filled everything out until I tell you. Loving this quiet work time. And then just to revisit what we're doing, we're selecting a couple inputs for each category that we know that we have so that we can um, make sure that, we're aligning what our activities are with those things. So, for example, one of the inputs you might have for budget is your 21st CCLC funding. One of the inputs you might have for personnel might be community college volunteers, something to that nature. And so we're looking for 2 to 3 for each one of our categories here. And then you're going to enter them, but we're not going to press enter, right? We'll press enter once I prompt you so that we all enter at once. All right, one more minute. All right. So get ready to post. Hold. Ready? 3, 2, 1, post. Whoa. That was cooler than I thought it was going to be. I'm not
Like an
gonna lie.
avalanche.
Yeah, right? Like a waterfall. Pretty cool. Okay. Let's take a look. Let's see what we've got here. Scanning for some patterns. All right, I'm seeing our summer break college students. Yeah, that's a great. I'm seeing that. That's a good pattern for personnel. I mean, it's a reliable workforce that you know you're going to have for the summer, right? Mm, I'm looking at community partners. I'm seeing a lot of like local libraries. Really, really helpful, particularly if we're looking to do, literacy instruction. Let's see what we've got here. So 21st CCLC stuff, and it looks like a number of us have some additional supporting grants, which is awesome. Which means that we're already looking at the sustainability aspect, right? Um, let's see. Oh, it looks like a lot of us have some really strong leaders, and as our personnel inputs too, which is great. Credentialed teaching staff, awesome. College interns as personnel, those are really, really great things. Looks like a lot of us have a decent amount of space too, which is amazing because space can often be at a premium. Hmm. Our teacher tutors, yep. And the fact that you have teacher tutors that are willing to come in and give you a hand during the summer is awesome too, right? Um, Ooh, some community foundation money too, right? So not only do we have our community partners that are giving us a hand, just supporting our activities, but they're also helping support us financially too. This is really, let me see, and this is what I really love about this planner because it forces you to slow down, take a beat, and like really zoom out. Because we all know that when you're planning for programming, it feels like you're doing a million things at the same time, and so it's very easy to have something fall through the cracks or put the cart before the horse, right? But this way it's very intentional, keeps you paced, and makes sure that you're looking at what inputs you have before you start planning these really amazing activities, so we know that we're not doing big pie in the sky type things. Let's take a moment to really reflect, right? How did you decide which inputs matter most? Can anybody let me know what like you used to make those kinds of decisions? You can either unmute or share in the chat, whatever you feel more comfortable with. But how did you decide which of these inputs matter the most?
If I can give input, I would feel like what made me decide that what mattered the most is because you have
Yes.
to have the staff
Right.
in order to provide the service for the members, and then you have to pay the staff in order
Yep.
to provide the service. So that was what made me decide.
You ain't lying. I'm telling you. Yes, you are speaking the truth. It's funny because it feels like you filter through a lot of these things, and a lot of these things kind of flow back to budget, right? I would also encourage you to think about the fact that your partners can also help you with these budgeting issues, right? Because yeah, we need to make sure that we're paying for all these things, but sometimes those community partners can really help support some aspect of our programming and help buoy our budget, help give us that little shot in the arm that our budget might need. Um, let's see. We have while budgeting is important, the training of the staff is essential, and making sure they're providing tutoring effectively and correctly. Right? Yeah, because I mean, we could have the money to pay all the people in the world, but if we're just paying them and not training them, that's I mean, what are we really doing? We're I don't know, maybe babysitting instead of doing really effective academic interventions, for our out of school time program. And we know that we can be so much more than that. So yes, that training is incredibly important. And I think something that people don't think about as often. They sort of rank it lower just because you don't think about it because it comes after having your people, having the money to hire your people, this, that, and the third. Um, yeah, our partners really a huge part. And again, um, the partners are super important because not only can they help you supporting maybe financial or material aspects of your programming, but they can also help you with family and community engagement, right? Because the more partners with whom you are connected, the more trust it builds in your program, right? And the more it shows that you are a part of this community. Now let's dig just a little bit deeper, right? Let's connect it moving forward. Let's think about how these inputs shape what activities are realistic uh, to offer and how often we can actually offer these, right? That's something that we're going to keep in mind as we move forward. So, next, we're going to start with planning activities. There are lots of activities out there, but picking the right ones takes more than just a really good idea. So we're going to look at 6 questions that you can use to really help just give you, it makes you pause, take a moment, and like I was saying just a moment ago, zoom out and think critically, making sure that every activity is purposeful and connected to student growth. So when you use these, you're going to design with intention rather than just something that you're doing out of convenience or just like whatever you fall into the habit of doing when it comes to planning. So let's look at these questions and talk about each of them for a minute. So, what need will this activity address? This question helps you anchor the activity in real identified needs, right? And so this ties back to the needs assessment that you did and the needs that you've identified in your logic model. This is specific, right? And this is something that is normally measurable, right? It's because it's a metric that you created from your needs assessment. So you want to make sure that it is supporting a need that you've already identified, and you want to talk about the way in which it's going to do so. So it should connect directly with the needs found in your logic model. Doing this prevents having activities that might be really fun and engaging, but they feel sort of random, right? It's like there's no real intention, there's no larger idea behind this activity. It's just a cool activity individually on its own. And even those could then get, like, if we're being intentional, could get folded in to larger intentional activities. But we need to make sure that we're really planning them instead of making them feel just like random fun asides. This question's a great way to make sure that you're shifting planning towards having meaningful impact with every single activity that you develop. Our next question is, what's the desired outcome for the activity, right? So we know what our need is. We know what our inputs are. We've identified what the activity is going to do. So what is actually going to happen, right? How is the need going to change because we're addressing it? This question clarifies what success looks like before the planning even really begins. Here, you want to be very specific about describing either a skill, like fluency in reading or something like that, verbal comprehension, something, auditory comprehension, something to that effect, maybe behaviors, or some sort of specific understanding that students should have when they finish the activity. But you don't want to just think about what skill they should leave with. You also want to think about um, how the student can then demonstrate what that skill that they've acquired or that understanding, this new behavior that they've acquired is. We're going to dive more into this in a moment when we talk about, intentional activity planning, but making sure that there are both components there, right? Being very intentional about what the skill, the behavior, the thing, the new ability that the student is going to acquire is, and then how they're going to then demonstrate that. And I would encourage you to also think about wrapping that into family engagement activities because demonstrating this newly acquired knowledge can be a really powerful thing to draw families in, if you need to get them in, because they'll always come to see their kid perform. So if you have their kid performing and maybe there's a little food or something like that, that's a great way to hook families if you're if you're struggling with family engagement. We also want to think about what resources are needed to implement this activity, right? So this question looks at our inputs again. It helps us really look at the activities that we're planning through the lens of quality, but also feasibility, right? It's very easy because we all are so passionate about delivering high quality things for our students to plan this amazing and elaborate activity that will be really impactful, right? But we don't necessarily have what we need, the resources in order to implement it. It's like, well, in order to actually do this activity, we would need, I don't know, 4 more staff members in order to do it properly in the small group structure that we're doing, or what have you. It's very easy to get caught up in planning a really big activity without the resources for it if we're not very procedural in how we're setting these things up. And that's why the logic model is so helpful. Um, so when you're answering this question, you want to list things like the staff capacity that you have, the materials that are available to you, of course, the space that you have to do it, right? Because that's something that I would often run into. I would plan really cool activities and then be like, oh, right, but I forgot that there's a club going on in the gym today, and our all-purpose room is going to be filled with, another, some other organization, and the PTO is meeting here. Oh, right. So now we don't have room to actually do this cool thing. Um, so if there are any of these things that are missing from your inputs in your logic model, then you're going to need to think about either ways that you can obtain these things or ways that you can pivot to plan the activity differently so you don't need that particular resource or input. And it's always important to keep that plan on the back burner too, because if you get more resources, then maybe we can do the full-fledged version of this activity. But don't be too proud to pivot. Don't be like, oh well, we'll just make it work. So we also want to think about how are student and family voice reflected in the planned activity. So this question is what really promotes engagement and relevance. And make sure that we're not just planning for our students, but we are planning for both students and families in mind, right? So I know I'm familiar with an example that actually went on in North Carolina summer programs last year, where a group was doing a lesson on social media using worksheets, and the students were really disengaged. But then they made a small shift and started using technology instead of the worksheets for the social media lesson, and because they had a smart board available, which made it way more engaging for those students and made it way more impactful when it comes to having the students and the families engage with what's going on. We also want to think about, do students have the foundational knowledge and skills for the activity, right? We don't want to try to do something with a student and it's beyond what they have already engaged with or learned, right? So this makes sure that the activity that we're doing is accessible and it's properly scaffolded if the students are not familiar with the things, right? So we need to make sure that there are enough supports there so that the students can be successful in something that is relatively new to them. This is that point where you really think about readiness and you consider what your students already know and then what supports they might need, right? They might be close, they might be proximal distance to this new skill that you want them to acquire, but they might need just some supports right now. Maybe just at the beginning of the activity, who knows? But you'll feel it out, right? And then doing this, being intentional about asking yourself this question prevents frustration or activities that are either too simple or too complicated, like too advanced for the students. And it helps staff design really helpful scaffolds that are going to be needed to set students up for success, right? Not just walking them through every component of the activity, but just providing some meaningful scaffolds so that the student can access that learning, on their own. We want activities to be both challenging and accessible to youth while we keep them engaged. Another really cool example from the summer programs last year, there was a group that was playing bingo with vocabulary words, but there was no real context for the vocabulary that was provided, right? So by incorporating sounding out words or like just providing definitions and matching them to the terms on the bingo card, you can scaffold that activity, right? You provide context for these words, making the words more accessible to the students. They're not just learning them in a vacuum, they're learning them in the larger context of, I don't know, cooking or whatever. Again, hungry, sorry. And then lastly, we want to think about what you'll see, hear, feel that's going to demonstrate that students are building the desired skills that you want, right? What measurable outcomes are we going to have that show us that these students are acquiring skills? This helps you. This is the point where you're identifying the observable indicators that reflect learning and growth. This is going to help you identify if students grew as a result of the activity, not just if the activity was cool for them, right? What did the students actually acquire? What new knowledge or skill or behavior did the student actually acquire during this activity that we've set up? And again, I want to encourage you to make sure that you're being intentional about the collection of those and then being specific about the data that you're collecting in order to measure that. So let's talk about aligning activities with needs and outcomes. We have these cool activities. We want to make sure that we're fully aligned, right? So let's look at an example using the scenario that we've been working with. No, you're good. There we go. Perfect.
I thought I went too far for a second.
Nah, you're perfect. All right. So we're going to look at what our needs statement is here, right? So our needs statement is students need to develop reading comprehension skills to identify the main idea in a non-fiction text. And our outcome is that 80% of students are going to demonstrate grade level reading comprehension of non-fiction texts as measured by pre and post program assessments. I want to take a moment here and look at how specific we are about the data that we're collecting in order to reflect our outcome. We have a measurable percentage of students, and we are doing it through pre and post program assessments, right? That's how we're measuring how much learning and the acquisition of skills that are going on here. So let's look at an activity plan example. So in our example activity plan, we have students creating a historical diorama. So let's look at what our description is here. So we have a historical diorama. Students are going to create a shoebox diorama as a visualization from the nonfiction narrative about life in the United States during the Dust Bowl. Oh man, lots of migration from farms, lots of people heading out west. So, what need will this activity address? Well, it's grade level appropriate reading comprehension, right? It's reading nonfiction texts. What is the desired outcome for this activity? Students are going to create a diorama of a scene from text that they read. The diorama should match the details of what they read, right? So we are comprehending the nonfiction text, and then we are using it, like what we've learned, what we acquired from that text, to create a diorama. And that diorama is also going to help demonstrate the learning, right? What resources do we need? Well, I mean, we're going to need art materials, right? We're probably going to need some shoe boxes for good old-fashioned dioramas, some popsicle sticks, tissue paper, construction paper, pens, markers, Play-Doh, I don't know, a lot of different things, right? You can get really creative when it comes to dioramas. I'm not that kind of creative. My stick figures come out crooked, but I've seen some really amazing dioramas. You also want to make sure that there are sufficient copies of the nonfiction text, right? So you want to make sure each child has a copy of the text that they will be using. And we want to make sure there's sufficient time. So there's 3 hours for the activity over a 1-week period. How our student and family voice reflected in the planned activity? When we did our family surveys, we got a disproportionate amount of responses back about how students love doing art projects, right? So what we've made sure that we're doing is incorporating the arts into a lot of the different things that we're doing. So we are not, they're not just reading about people during the Dust Bowl and then telling us about it. No, they get to do a really cool art project after they've accessed this text and done what we've asked them to do and acquired some new knowledge. So the next question is, do students have the foundational knowledge and skills to do this activity. What foundational knowledge and skills will students need? I'm going to encourage you to let me know what that is. So share in the chat what you would put for this next question. What foundational knowledge and skills do students need to do this shoebox diorama activity? What are some things that you might see, feel, and hear that are going to demonstrate that students are building the desired skills too? But we'll do one at a time. Just yeah, yeah.
Sorry, Chaz.
No, you're good. So just let me know in the chat what foundational knowledge and skills students are going to need to do this really cool diorama activity. The history of the Dust Bowl, right? Like, do we even know what the Dust Bowl is? Have we played Oregon Trail? What grade level do they read on, right? Do they have any knowledge of what the Dust Bowl refers to? And these are things that we could also touch base with our school day partners about, right? We can, go talk to the teachers and say, hey, look, this is what I'm looking to do. And how are we going to do that, right? Reading level, yep. History, soil, yeah, soil erosion, right? So how deep are we going, right? What is causing the Dust Bowl? Creativity, yeah, that's something like. And so do our students love art but they're not creative? Well, then maybe we need to scaffold some diorama stuff here. And yeah, that's right, actually they need to understand what a diorama is. So maybe we have an example, something that they can look at and go check out as they're working during the week, right? Like, oh, we'll go check out the example diorama if you're having problems, if you're not sure about it. Historical research and a design process, I love that. We're getting deep there. I love that, Dr. Banks. Yeah, they're going to need reading levels and prior knowledge of the Dust Bowl and how to do a diorama. Yeah, absolutely, Zaria. Thank you. So what are some things that you might see, feel, or hear that demonstrate students are building the desired skills that you want? Right. So a basic one is that they're understanding the nonfiction text, right? Like, did they understand what they read? Or are they doing a diorama on a whole different thing, right? Hearing students ask questions. Yes, I love that, right? As they're reading, when they might ask questions of each other, they might ask questions of you, but catching that in the moment, that curiosity in the moment and responding to it, incredible. And then their responses to questions, like maybe you have some prompting questions, right? Maybe there's just some formative assessment stuff that you're doing as you're milling around while the students are working independently. Their responses to questions and their input. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. A field trip, yes, sounds good to me. I am down. Let's go to a museum. Let's do something fun. Let's make our own fake Oregon Trail or something like that. Discourse about the narrative and comparison to present. Yeah, I love that. Right, like sort of higher level discourse about like what the text is saying, and then what it might look like, how it might compare to modern day. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for your responses. So as you move forward, I want to encourage you to think about how many activities you might need to plan, and what you're going to do if students don't have those foundational skills, right? Think about activities that you could do before to build the foundational skill to get to your larger, the larger goal of your bigger activity. Awesome. So now we're going to dive into what it looks like to plan an activity, and Yana's going to take you through it.
Thanks, Chaz. So everyone, now that we've thought, why isn't it cooking? There we go. So now that we've really thought about and identified what do our kids really need and taken that moment to think about if there are some gaps and filling in those gaps, like Chaz was just talking about, being aware of the skills, the background knowledge that your kids might not have. And you all shared some examples of background knowledge. There was a nice little flashback to Oregon Trail there, which I appreciated. I don't think our kids play it I don't think it exists anymore, but boy, was that a good part of childhood.
It really was.
Oh, don't you remember going to the computer room and it was like the most computer? That's a flashback too.
Getting snake bit or dying of
Oh
dysentery?
God,
Yeah.
dysentery.
Oh
How many
gosh.
times did I die from that? Okay, sorry.
Okay, anyway,
A
sorry.
nice, there might be some staff here who are a little too young even to remember Oregon Trail, which is going to make me feel really old. Um, but it was a good time. It was before there were so many options with video games, but it was educational. Um, and so, yeah, so a lot of us do remember it. Our children, unfortunately, don't necessarily get the joy of it. But nevertheless, they do need to have that experience of understanding what lives are like. And obviously, Oregon Trail is a little bit earlier, but having that opportunity of picking texts that kids are going to connect with, stories that kids are going to connect with, to really give them that experience. So that was a nice flashback for me, Chaz. I hadn't thought about Oregon Trail in a long time. Um, so now that we've identified some of those gaps, we really want to talk about how do we actually uh, plan a high quality activity. So how do we go through the steps? Oopsie. Um, how do we go through those steps, go through those questions that Chaz walked us through that really helped us understand, is this going to be a high quality activity? Do we know all the things we have to know about our kids' needs to make sure that we are meeting them where they are? Um, so when we are planning that high quality activity, we always want to have our needs in front of us. We want to be aware of what those needs actually are. We've talked about them previously. We're using this example. Today, we're going to move through this with this example, but it's something we've already talked about of understanding that data on every level. So, understanding the community level data that our community has a lot of adults who don't have a high school diploma. So, we may be thinking about how do we additionally serve the adults in our or the families of our students. We understand that our 30% of our students are not at meeting grade level expectations on the literacy assessment. So we have to be thinking about that. We are thinking about our individual student data that we've gotten from our teachers, and our kids are struggling to identify the main idea. And as I believe Chaz mentioned, this is really common. Nationwide, it is a challenge that kids struggle a lot more with nonfiction texts than they do with fiction texts. And that's something that probably a lot of us don't read that much nonfiction. It carries into adulthood. But that is something we really want to work on and build those skills because our kids are going to have to read newspaper articles and understand what those mean. They're going to have to understand legal paperwork if they are applying for something or they have to fill out their tax forms. Those are all types of nonfiction texts. So kids are going to encounter a lot of those through their lives, whether in academic context or non-academic context. So we want to think about how do we create activities that are going to engage them and also give them that essential practice with reading, understanding, and working with those nonfiction texts. So based on the needs that we have identified here, we are going to have a fun little activity and we're going to do this as a group. Again, as we did earlier, we're going to ask you to kind of think through your answers individually, and then we will ask you all to publish your answers and we'll get a chance to walk through. And of course, if any of you want to unmute yourself, that would be great too. So what you're going to be doing is we want to make sure that we have a high quality activity that answers all of these questions. And you're going to write your answers in the chat box as with before. So you are going to fill or create two activities, at least one, hopefully two activities that follow the template that Chaz just shared in the chat box. This is a short activity idea. It doesn't have to be a full lesson plan. and try to answer these 6 questions for the activity you're designing. So, for example, if your kids are learning about the Dust Bowl, the activity is they have to read an article and then create that diorama. So, can you answer those 6 questions for that activity? Describe what the kids are going to do. They're going to read some nonfiction text, then they're going to create a diorama representing it. You're going to identify the need addressed. So, for example, the need in that case would be practicing understanding the main point of a nonfiction text. That's grade level appropriate. Our desired outcome is students are able to identify that main point or main points of the text and demonstrate those through their diorama. Resources are some of those materials that students might need. You might need a lot of shoe boxes. Back in the day, we would ask families to bring in shoe boxes. You also might need some additional staff on hand because anything with art projects gets messy very quickly. Also, thinking about student family voice, maybe you did a survey. We know kids in our program really love art, so we are giving them an opportunity to integrate the arts into that literacy project. Foundational skills, even as they're developing a better understanding of understanding the main point of a text, or they're developing that skill, they do need to have literacy skills to read those texts. There might be challenging vocabulary that they need introduction to and might need support to understand how it fits into the articles or the information they're reading. And the evidence, there's kind of 2 pieces of evidence. When kids are reading, that might look like all of the kids kind of being quiet and concentrating, or maybe they're working in a group and so one person is reading out loud and the other students are in the group are being really attentive or following along with the text. And then when kids are actually working on their diorama, you could probably expect some controlled chaos, some noise as kids are finding the different pieces and the different supplies they need, or they're talking about how their dioramas differ. So that is really thinking about, how do I know my activity is really working? So you're going to use that template that Chaz shared in the text box, and we're going to give you, as earlier, a few minutes of quiet work time. And then when we say, we're going to ask you to share your activity ideas in the chat box. And if anyone wants to mute themselves and share their activity, that would be awesome. So I'll stop talking so you have a couple of minutes to think through and create that high quality activity. As a reminder, you are using the template that Chaz shared in the chat box to create a high quality activity that will help students develop those literacy skills, better understanding the Dust Bowl. And you're going to answer these 6 questions to sort of touch base that you're really addressing and creating a high quality activity that will meet student needs. Let's take one more work minute and then we'll ask you all to share your responses in the chat box. And if anyone wants to unmute themselves, definitely do that as well. All right, now is the time. I would love for everyone to share in the chat box what activity you have come up with. So a sentence or two, and some of those answers to the questions about your activity plan. What need are you going to address? What you're hoping your students will accomplish or learn? What resources you need or your students need to be successful, how it's addressing student and family voice, so thinking about student interests, what foundational skills students need, and what it's going to see, hear, and feel like, um, so that you know the activity was really successful. So I will give everyone a minute before I start reading. So, ooh, lots of answers coming in. I'm excited to read all of these. All right. Ooh, here's an interesting one I'm excited about. So here is an example on identifying Jesse Macy shared an example identifying native plants on a hike. And this gives students opportunities to develop observation skills, their classification skills, and to better understand conservation. And their desired outcome is that students will, by the end of it, I'm sorry, the goal is students will be able to work in partners to identify 5 native plant species and their importance in the ecosystem of the region. They'll also be able to identify factors that put these plants at risk. Students will need journals, field guides, printouts of native plants, and probably non-native or invasive species, because a lot of the times those can mimic or look very similar to native species. So we want to give them the skills they need to compare and to know that as much as we're hoping all of the plants in that area are native, it's very common to have a lot of invasive species or just non-native species that may or may not be invasive. But that's a separate conversation for a separate time. You guys tell I was a biology teacher in a past life. So the resources also include you need access to a hike. Hopefully you live near a state park or a national park, or even a more local park with reasonable walking trails, making sure that they are accessible to your student. The foundational skills is they need to understand what makes a plant native, what makes a plant invasive. What are the consequences of losing those native plants? They also just need to have experience with using a field guide. If anyone has ever used a plant identification field guide, you go through a series of steps. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure to identify what plant species you're looking at. Nowadays, there is technology that you can kind of just take a screenshot, or you can take a picture of it, and it will, with a pretty good amount of accuracy, identify the species for you. But definitely our preference, we do want to give kids that experience of kind of doing the hunting piece. Back in the day, in my day, when we were identifying some species and we found some species we couldn't identify, we used to email a professor and say, with relevant expertise, and say, can you identify these plants? Because we're not sure. Long time ago. And the evidence of success is seeing students sketching the different plants, having conversations about the plants, and really accurately identifying which species they're looking at, whether they're native or non-native. And a lot of that evidence might come in those written journals, or it might come if you're doing a structured conversation as well. So I love this activity. I think it's a great idea. obviously, anything with the environment is close to my heart. But some things I'm thinking about is really making sure that you are matching the activity with the desired outcome. So we know that kids are going on this hike to identify specific plants. How does the hiking piece of it connect to that desired outcome? For example, are they observing how if they're at different elevations, there's going to be some different plants? Have they learned about what makes that area particularly attractive or makes it really possible for specific plants to grow? So really thinking about how every aspect of that activity gives students an opportunity to develop a necessary skill. So again, that's deepening that learning experience. And I'm just thinking about the fact that you're talking about those scientific observation skills, and really underneath those foundational skills, have students been introduced to how you do nature observations? Are you using some kind of framework? So giving them that base of knowledge is another way you can kind of tighten that activity and make sure it's really accessible and really high quality. The next activity right after that sounds really important is from Dr. Conyers, and having students create a Juneteenth family celebration booth at the community's Juneteenth celebration. So that can give students an opportunity to addressing the needs of understanding their community, bringing families together, and that's an opportunity to demonstrate their learning. I'm wondering here, desired outcome supported, you're talking about what kids will accomplish, but we want to be as specific as possible as what we want our students to be able to do. So we want them to be able to create a plan and execute a plan for an attractive Juneteenth booth. We want them to write down some information to teach their community, whatever that might be. The resources needed include books, speakers, nonfiction texts about Juneteenth, some background on why we celebrate it, what is important for it, the fact that this is a holiday that wasn't added to the national calendar until, the last 2 was it 2023 or 2024, Chaz? Has it been removed? Okay.
I think it's on the docket to be removed, but yes.
Okay. Well, I'm going to keep my comments to myself. Student and family voice, that is a way to bring students into that community. We've seen that in that discussion. Dr. Conyers, I am wondering about what foundational skills might be necessary for this. So that's something I'm not seeing a description of. But if kids are at that community celebration and they are having really meaningful conversations, they're having a great time, that's what I'm gonna see, hear, feel, know that our work is really valuable and seeing that connection. So thank you for sharing that. Let's look at one. I'm trying to find another activity that looks different, just so we see a whole variety of activity ideas. Ooh, I like this. Okay, Leroy Ray shared, my ultimate summer adventure will be a writing activity where students write a multi-paragraph narrative where they are strengthening their writing skills, their grade appropriate writing skills. That's a need that students have. And it's giving them that opportunity for creativity and self-expression. So there's some student voice right in there, where they are addressing that need for writing practice, prevent skill loss, support students in organizing ideas, using descriptive language, developing complete stories. These are all things kids always need practice with, using that grade level vocabulary, using really descriptive vocabulary, being really specific, really inviting the author and or inviting the reader into their story, being those compelling authors. The desired outcome is that students will demonstrate improved writing abilities as measured by, sequencing, sentence structure, use of dialogue, use of specific different kinds of narrative structure, possibly. So some students might want to write in paragraphs. Some students might be writing different kinds of sentences, whether they're compound sentences, things like that. Resources, writing paper or journals, pencils, graphic organizers, possibly art tools, possibly digital tools. The foundational skills students need are sentence structure, paragraph organization. If anybody remembers kind of the skeletons we used to use for writing a high quality paragraph, tell me what you're going to write it, summarize what you just wrote. Yeah, everybody remembers that. Good. Yes. Listen, that stuff works. I'm not critiquing. Those lessons from elementary school stick with you, hopefully. The evidence of learning is that students will actually write that 3 to 5 paragraph narrative, and they might share it with the group as an example of really engagement connecting. So yeah, we want to hear kids be engaged. We want to hear kids share, read out loud, also intentional, important skills right there. So thank you everyone for sharing. Oh, there's so many good ideas. Let me see, do we want to share one more?
Yeah, so many good things. You guys knocked this out of the park.
Oh yeah, I'm reading through trying to pick some. Ooh, oh, I love a space activity. Ooh, garden to table. Ugh, Chaz, I can't even choose. There are a lot of science-based activities, which warms my heart. Here's one from Annette Mason, that students are going to participate in a library trip as a family. And the needs addressed is that students and families, this is really thinking about the fact that we want to serve not just our kids, but their families as well. Students and families will learn how to use the resources at the library. There's not just books at the libraries are amazing. They have so many resources. Librarians are brilliant, wonderful human beings. The desired outcome is being more comfortable using resources. So I'm just thinking about tightening a little bit. I think we want to be as specific as possible of what does being comfortable. So are they identifying, 3 to 5 resources in the library at the library that they want to use again? So that could be, a lot of libraries have like read alouds or classes after in the afternoon. So could it be identifying one activity they want to participate in as a family? Could it be having a conversation with a librarian and identifying 3 resources the library has that they want to make use of? The resources needed might just be transportation. That's an important one. Hopefully the library is accessible in your community, but that's not always the case. In some communities, they might be pretty far. If your program has transportation, that can be a great way to get kids and families there, but that's something you might need to troubleshoot and think about, because libraries generally don't have a way to troubleshoot. I've seen some programs, if you develop a relationship with the library, of a librarian will come to your program space, and that can be an opportunity. So that's a conversation to have with your local librarian.
some student and family voice. This is just going to be a really great resource for them. Families are always looking for resources, things to do with their kids, um, and thinking about the foundational skills. So, foundational skills, ability to read, but a library is a great place to develop those foundational skills. So a lot of libraries might have classes for English language learners, might have basic literacy classes for adults. So it's not necessarily the case that if families don't have those skills yet, that they can't develop those at the library. And some things that you might see, hear, and feel is that you see families coming together and all the kids are excited and saying, I can't wait to go to the library this afternoon. And you have a conversation with the librarians next week and they tell you, oh, like 6 of your kids showed up to a family program we had over the weekend. So those are some examples of ways that your libraries can be an amazing resource. So shout out to librarians. So thank you all for sharing and there's so many ideas. I've just highlighted a couple of them. I don't want to shortchange any of the other ideas. I just wanted to share a couple, but there's many of them. So don't take my not reading your activity as a critique, just we're time limited. Okay, so outputs. Outputs are not outcomes. That is a thing that is a little bit confusing. We already talked about outcomes. That is what we want our kids to achieve. We define outcomes early because that will guide what activities we use, that will guide what resources we will use, etc. Outputs is really a measure of what you're doing. It is a measure of how many sessions you're offering, how many hours of program you're offering, how many events you're offering, how many kids and families are attending your events, your programs. This is really how you're tracking your data of what your program is actually doing, what your site is actually doing. So thinking about, for example, that library activity, we're not thinking about outcomes. The outputs is we took 3 program field trips to the library. We spent an hour at the library every program. We had 14 families attend the first time, 12 families attend the second time, and 15 families attend the third time, just as an example. So that is a tracker of we're doing these activities, how many people are actually participating, how are they participating, all of those pieces. It's a way to monitor. So it's a way to make sure our implementation is meeting those expectations of we said we want, 27 kids to participate in this activity. Did 27 kids participate in our activity? Did 20 kids participate in our activity or 30? You never know. So tracking that, having that opportunity is going to be really important. Okay, so let's think about those outputs. The outputs, again, is about the delivery of your program. It's about we offered this program 3 times. We were there for an hour each time. This is the number of families that participated in. Outcomes are, this is what we wanted our kids to achieve. Did we or did we not achieve our goal? And those are those pieces that we are defining early, much earlier on. So let's do a little outputs activity. And again, we're just going to do this one in the chat box, giving you all some quiet work time. I think that's something we don't always do a lot of. So I'm excited that we're doing that this way. So thinking about, we have already defined our activity. We made that activity plan. We answered all those questions about our activity. So we all know what we're kind of hoping to achieve and how we're going to make sure we're getting there. Now we want to define the outputs for the activity you just planned in, just a couple of minutes ago. How much did we do? For whom? How often? So here's what you're going to do. Again, you're going to use that logic model context and using, once again, the activity that you just planned. So if you weren't able to plan an activity, you can use the example of the Dust Bowl that we carried through as an example, or you can read through some of those examples that were shared in the chat box and choose one of those, whatever you prefer, whatever is going to be best for you. And the things you want to record for your outputs activity, that title, you already came up with it. How many sessions you think you're going to need for this activity? How many minutes? Is this an activity that each session is going to be an hour, 45 minutes? Is it going to be a longer activity that takes 2 hours, whatever it is? How many students or families you're expecting to attend, how you're going to track that attendance, and how many of these events are family events, if it's relevant. It's not always. When you're doing this, this is a really good opportunity for a reality check. Is your activity plan actually feasible? So is there time in your schedule to offer this activity as often as you're saying? Because sometimes you have an amazing activity plan. So for example, we have this amazing activity plan to go to the library, but reality check, do you actually have access to transportation every time? Is this going to be accessible to families? Think about what time you're offering the programs. Think about schedules, how you're going to get people there. Language access might be an issue in your community. Think about how we're going to track this data. And finally, making sure the dosage is aligned with that skill you're building. So some skills that are really important, those literacy skills that we all saw in that activity, those are really in the activities you designed. Those are some of the most important skills kids are going to develop. So this is the type of thing that we want to give a lot of time and energy to. Some activities, some outcomes might not be as important, might not be those same foundational level skills. So I'm going to give you all some time to work individually. Chaz shared an outline in the chat box, just like we've done before. I'm going to ask you to either handwrite it or type it in the chat box, but don't share your answers until I prompt you. We're going to give you a couple of minutes of quiet work time, and then we're all going to share our answers and we'll run through some of those great ideas. Okay, I'll stop talking, save some work time.
Kara, thank you for being with us. And just a quick reminder, this is being recorded. So if you want to come back to watch the last 10, 12 minutes, you can always do that. I'm going to give everybody one more minute to work before we share those answers in the chat box. Alrighty, why doesn't everyone share your response in the chat box, and we will get some of that info and do shakes. Alrighty, so let's take a look at a couple of these answers. So thinking about, let's take a look here. Scrolling. So thinking about, for example, that Diary of a Dusty Kid activity idea. And that wasn't one I read out in, but it was in the chat box previously. So connecting to that Dust Bowl, making sure that there are 5 sessions, 45 minutes each. The expected number of participants are 25 students. We're going to track attendance with After School HQ. You might be using different software. Some of us might be doing this on paper. Whatever works for you. And we will invite families for one of those sessions so students can do a presentation. Great. So that is tracking. And by the end of that activity, you can do a little checklist of, did we have 5 sessions? We did. Were the sessions 45 minutes each? We did. Were there 25 participants? Yep. And did we have one of those family events? Excellent. Here's one on reading and responding circles. Again, that was one that was shared earlier that I didn't read out loud. There's going to be 2 sessions weekly. Each of those sessions will be 45 minutes. Tracking that through my club, 20 participants, and we're going to also include a family engagement night. So thank you everyone for sharing of those ideas. So we're tracking how many hours are we offering this? Are we actually really implementing with Fidelity? So thank you everyone for sharing. So today, What we covered is really working through our logic model to identify the inputs, to really think through some of those essential activities when we're planning aligned essential questions when we're planning our aligned activities. So we're making sure that our activities are aligned with the needs that our students, our families, our community have. And we defined our outputs. That's going to be a quick checklist of did we actually offer as much and as often as we planned? So really making sure that's kind of our self check-in, some of that accountability, making sure we're doing what we set out to do. And sometimes plans change and things happen, and it's not the case that it's always going to be exactly what we expect. But that's helpful for us to know. And that is something that this is really that continuation of the earlier work we've done with the logic model. So Chaz will share in the chat box the link to our feedback form. We would love to get some feedback from you. How did we do? Is there information that you would like us to share that we have missed? That's really helpful for us to make sure that we are doing a good job and meeting the needs of you and your program. So please do it's very short, so take a minute to fill out that feedback form. We'd really appreciate it. And until our next session next month, this could be a great time to circle back around to your logic model and start to fill it in with some of the activities you'd like to do that are aligned with student needs, and really defining the outputs. So how you're going to do it, what you want your, how many hours, all of those different pieces. So thank you, Chaz, for sharing that link in the chat box. You can all reach out there and give us just some quick information about how we did today. That'd be very appreciated. So a huge thank you to your state leadership for inviting us. As a reminder, you can always catch up with us on our website, the 21stcclcntech.org. There's lots of resources. There's that message board where you can connect and talk with other professionals here and nationwide. We do have a community where you can talk to other North Carolina professionals. And we've mentioned this before, but just a quick reminder that within our learning management system, there are a lot of resources, a lot of courses, tools that you can use to continue to plan out a really high quality summer program. We're getting close. It's just, 6 months away, so not too far in the future. And of course, if you have any questions, please do let us know. You can pop those in the chat box. If you have a chance, fill out that feedback form for us. And hopefully we will hear from you. You can reach us by email, visit our website, and we will definitely see you next month. So thank you to your state leadership for having us. And we really appreciate having the opportunity to spend this time with all of you. So please do let us know any way we can continue to support you and your program. And Chaz, thank you so much for doing this with me. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you too, Yana. Always amazing.
A good time. Thank you, everyone. And we will see you next month, which is exciting. Getting into February, we're really moving through.
Yeah, seriously, that year is already starting to fly.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Intact, for providing this wonderful presentation and professional development for us once again. So our grantees, on behalf of the 21st Century team, thank you. We will make sure that this recording is in the listserv as well as the presentation. And if you have any questions, please reach out to your program administrator. In the meantime, we look forward to seeing you again in February, and everyone stay warm. Have a great day.